And this is the point in the program that I introduce our guest analysts who are here to give their perspectives on nearly everything we've covered in the past half hour or so on the program. And today I'm joined here in the studio by the journalist, policy strategist and Arise News analyst Waziri Adio, and by the political affairs commentator, Arise News analyst and lecturer at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. I should probably add to that also the author who's just launched his latest book. And let's not even talk about Waziri Adio, who's also got quite a few under his belt. So I'm in the company of academic royalty and journalistic proficiency, let's put it that way. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thanks for being generous.
Yeah, let me start with you, Waziri. You were listening to another professor, Professor Patu Tomi, who joined us from Lagos. Absolutely superb analysis of the situation in Nigeria, but also obviously a member of the Labour Party. What did you make of what he said?
As always, Professor Patu Tomi is always eloquent, a joy to listen to. It made a lot of sense. So, you know, he did very well in making a case for where he is at the moment and for the candidate that is supporting. So there are some assumptions or there are some things that he said that we need to wait.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say he's a theoretician, isn't he? I mean, at least in this context.
Yeah. There are many things, you know, and you know, politics drives on hope. You know, you have to be very hopeful. You have to be very optimistic to be in the game. You know, so there are certain things that he mentioned about the fact that Labour Party, the strength of Labour Party, and the networks and the superstructure, and how that dwarfs, you know, the structure of APC and PDP. There are some assumptions there that you know when the rubber meets the road. The fact Labour Party is not new. Labour Party has been in existence since 2002, and it has association with NLC, right? So it's the association with NLC, the Labour movement, has always been there.
Yeah.
But what has been the performance of Labour Party over time? In 2019, the Labour Party candidate scored only 5,000 votes. 5,000 votes. Whereas there's a new momentum because of the personality of Mr. Peter Obi, and you know the enthusiasm and the angst and the mobilization going on with different constituencies. But the campaign has not started. When the campaign starts, that is when you know the strength of
the mobilizing strength of a political
of the different parties.
Yeah.
But as you also mentioned, it's not just, yes, people are angry, yes, you know, the country is in a bad place, but that does not automatically translate to that everybody thinks the same way or everybody agrees. Yes, we've seen some rallies and all of that, but yes, you know, you've seen rallies in Abuja, for example. Abuja has more than 2 million people. Charles, if you have 1,000 people on the streets of Abuja, it will seem as if Abuja has been shut down, at least on TV, you know, and all of that. But what is the percentage of 1,000 over 2 million, right? What the actual thing is that, yes, it's good that we're seeing all of this. Would that translate to votes?
Well, in fairness, actually, I think the figure is a lot bigger than 2 million now.
Yes, I'm just saying, you know,
in terms of the population.
Population, you know, but
it's more closer to 5-6 million now.
The point I'm trying to make is that if 1,000 people pour on the street of Abuja, you think that
I understand what you mean.
So the point I'm trying to make is that the fact that we've seen all this is welcome. Yes, you know, we've seen indications of news, you know, sign of politics. What we need to see is whether the new way of doing politics that people like Professor Patu Tomi hope for,
whether that catches on,
whether that will catch on, and whether that will actually crowd out the old way of doing politics.
That's a very good point.
We will not know until, you know, the campaign starts, and ultimately until after the ballot is cast.
Absolutely. Let me bring you in, Professor Adeniyi. He was making the point, Professor Utomi, that it's also about timing and about the right time. You've got this confluence of things happening. You know, you've got really disgruntled youth. You've got the fact that the president is not running again, President Buhari, and you've got this mood in the country for something new and different. And then you've got people coalescing around a candidate that they believe in. That's his argument. Do you subscribe to that?
Yeah, I think I do largely. You know, I mean, Professor Tommy is a foremost public intellectual. You know, it's one of the most vibrant. Yeah, he's the foremost public intellectual.
He's not a guy out on the streets sort of hitting the grassroots and getting votes out. I mean, he's tried several times and he didn't get there.
Yeah, but there's
himself.
a point he made. You know, and that point reminds me of the cliche: mind can sometimes matter over matter. You know, which is to say that the determination of the people, you know, can, you know, override structures, what we call structures, you know. When we are seeing activities looking like a movement, you know, it can override any other kind of calculation that we are imagining, you know, in favor, and it can work in favor of Labour Party. But there's something else that he also underscored, which is the reason why we think the way we think, largely. And of course, it resonates with me in respect of his theory of state capture. You know, and that speaks to the crisis of development that we're having as a nation, which is to say that you have structures. Our structures are well in place. Nothing is wrong with our structures, but the human being, the human element managing those structures. You know, and it's not necessarily about the people, not that something is inherently wrong with the persons, with the humans, but the structures override them such that they are shaped by the structure. But what we need to change the dynamics is for maybe an outlier, a disruptive person, possibly like Peter Obi or like Professor Patu Tommy himself, coming in and being very, very determined, you know, to use their strong character, their strong will and determination to override, you know, the predilections of the problematic structure. Right. And that's what we need in this country. Otherwise, we're not going to see anything different post-2023 presidential election.
That's an interesting analysis. And going by that, Waziri, let's look at what's happening in the PDP, the People's Democratic Party, which arguably is part of that old structure that he's talking about. I mean, we're seeing the rift, the deepening, widening rift between a very powerful faction within that party and another very powerful faction, which consists of the leadership of the PDP and all the rest of it. What is your assessment of that, particularly in the context of the evolution of politics in this country that Professor Abiodun and Professor Utomi are talking about? Are these guys on another planet and they're not seeing what is actually happening, and that the goalposts are shifting? I mean, the country is moving possibly beyond them.
I'm sorry to interrupt before Waziri comes in, please. Let me just also add this to say that, you know, I saw that you referred to Professor Utomi as a theoretician somewhat. It may not necessarily be, because there's an interaction between theory and practice.
Absolutely.
And there's no, all practices
Ideas
are rooted in theories, and all theories are interpretations of practice. You know, so there's a dialectical connection between the two.
I agree.
And one cannot be wholly one.
And in fact,
it is that interaction that leads to a new form of development, which we hope will happen in 2020.
And that's a very important point, because the one thing Nigeria has lacked is that visionary, that ideological side of things, the philosophy from which you can then bring out the practical. So that's a very important point. Sorry.
Yeah, it's difficult to get in between two professors.
You mean himself and
Professor Patutomi.
Don't put me in Tommy's class.
I think you do very well for yourself, Professor Adeniyi.
So the first thing I want to say before I come back to the PDP question that you asked is that there's some stirring in the political space that suggests that there's an aspiration for a new way of doing politics, right? But to equate that to something entirely new is something that we need to watch. I think all this talk about structure, you know, and all of that, there's something that we're missing. Professor Patutomi mentioned something about state capture, right? But I think beyond that, and he traced it to 1999 or even before that, but something more fundamental than that is that the organizing logic of the Nigerian state is that of patronage. It's that of prebendalism, right? Because people just see power as an opportunity to help themselves.
And it's not going to go away overnight,
people
is it?
Close to them.
Yeah.
So if we think, because we're also setting ourselves up, if we think, oh, because there's a new guy on the block, and once you elect that new guy, the entire culture
will change.
Yeah. I think we're setting ourselves up for something.
That's
so we need to really pay attention to that. Yes, one person can make a lot of difference, but you need to change the entire culture. And there's a lot of work to be done, across the board, in society. So that's about that. On the issue of PDP, the different factions within PDP, I think it's an interesting development. It's also a development that should worry people in PDP and the rest of us, because PDP is the leading opposition party. And, today they are in control of 13 states out of 36. And, only ABGA has, one other state. APC has 22. So you expect this party to be able to pick the pocket of APC. But you can't do that if you are not united.
Absolutely.
And, there's this back and forth. I think eventually they need to, come together and settle their differences. And in politics is the art of the possible.
Well, we know what they need to do. The question is, will they do it?
I think they will. I think they will. And this is the reason why I'm saying that.
Right.
Yes, there are different arguments about the Wike camp. Is saying, you can't have the candidate of the party and the chairman of the party coming from the same section of the country. And don't forget that the backdrop to that is this sentiment that power should shift to the south.
Yeah.
After 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari.
So basically, they're letting Atiku get away with it.
So they're saying, yes, right. There's nothing you can do. You can't say Atiku should not be the candidate. But we need to go. There are other issues that they are not. But this is what they are hanging it on, and it's difficult to argue with that. On the other side, you have people in PDP who are saying there's a process for changing the chairman. And that does not necessarily mean that if the IU has to go, that it has to go to the south. So in between all of this, I think eventually they will come to a middle ground, right? Candidate Atiku will have to decide, can I call the bluff of these people, as some people are asking me to do? Wike is not standing alone. He has three or some other
political heavyweights
behind him.
No question about that.
PDP has 13 governors, right? Wike and his camp, they have between 4 to 7. That's a sensible number. So you need to see, eventually I think there's going to be a trade-off. After all this bluster, all this, thing back and forth, I think eventually they will come to a middle ground. But the only problem is that would the Wike camp stop at just insisting that you should go?
Or will they want more?
Or would they want more?
Right, okay.
And I think eventually, that's the question they need to address.
Well, let me bring you in, Professor Adeniyi, because Waziri is saying that he believes that at some point the desire to win and the desire to put up a formidable fight in the upcoming election will supersede the squabble. The problem is that time is going. I mean, we've got 6 days to the start of the elections. And if you're still fighting and quibbling, because it's not something that will be settled just like that, then it doesn't bode well, does it? Yeah,
but I think I agree with Waziri to the extent that it's good for us to give them some ray of hope, to be optimistic about the fact that they can possibly still settle their difference. Or differences in the build-up to the elections, because PDP is a behemoth, it's a traditional party, a legacy party, and you do not want them going into the election as a weakened entity. If they are okay, all the structures are fine, all the people are on the same page, you should expect a more vibrant contest, and of course it's also going to be very good, for the citizens, as the case could be. But again, it depends on a whole lot of things. If we're able to move away a little bit from the politics of patronage and compensation, where people think first what is in there for me, which is also consistent with, you know, what I don't want to run the risk of you accusing me of being a theoretician, you know, but what people call what I think it's really the concentric circle of activity, concentric cycle of leadership, you know, where you should rather privilege the outer ring first before the inner ring. The outer ring being the community, and the inner ring bring your friends and relations. You know, that's actually our being as a nation, and you will see that happening within the political parties as well. You know, thinking of themselves first before the larger community. Whereas, you know, you should privilege the interest of those at the outer ring, the nation, your party as a whole, instead of what you think, you know, is in there for me. So I think PDP going forward, you know, I sympathize with their presidential flag bearer Atiku, and it has not given up still. It's still very, very hopeful, still very, very conciliatory. But whether or not it will achieve any success going forward remains the question.
That's the key thing, isn't it, Waziri?
Right, yeah.
Because, I mean, you know, the issue is how quickly can this be resolved and how soon? Because that's just one problem within the PDP. There is another problem. We had this young man here yesterday, a guy called Ifaluyi Isibo, who's run a few times under the PDP, but has now essentially changed his loyalty from the PDP's presidential candidate to the Labour Party. And I was going through the internet today. I mean, there are literally dozens of them, people who may not be on television and have their sort of thing, but there are dozens of them who are saying exactly the same thing. So, you know, independent, non-partisan politicians who are still affiliated with the party but are supporting other candidates. I mean, that sounds like a multi-pronged problem for the PDP, and it may not just be just the PDP, it could also be the other parties. It
is, and indeed, if you look at PDP of 2019, you know, the backed Atiku against President Buhari, that PDP is in 4 camps now. You have the presidential candidate is also Atiku, but even from that PDP, you have Labour. You know, Peter Obi was his running mate; he's now in Labour. You have Wike, you know, there's that, you know, that supported Tambuwal in 2019, but eventually backed Atiku. Wike is leading a faction within PDP. Then you have Kwankwaso in NNPP. So you see, the PDP of 2019 is now has fractured into like 4 camps. But the thing is this: we have a long campaign period, the longest we have ever had, right? The campaigns, when they start next week, will be on for 5 months. Yeah. So that's enough time for people to get their acts together. It's also enough time for things to get worse. So we need to wait, you know, and see. But I think, I'm very convinced that eventually, like I keep saying, they will realize that they are better off putting their house in order. For them to be able to put up a formidable fight. You know, yes, all of these things that people are saying, they are there, but let me tell you this. We wish that there will be a new politics in February 2023, but everywhere you go to in this country, even where there's no light, even where there's no signal for telephone, APC is there, PDP is there. So these are you know, and that's the structure that people are talking about.
That basically, you know, means that they have a formidable fight on their hands.
They have a machine, you know, and yes, something might change. The momentum that we're seeing now might change things. But
that's what we know is there for now.
They're there. They have name recognition. People know them. People know their symbols. They are foot soldiers, you know. And the way our politics is that people belong to different networks. And it's not about, you know, whether they go out to march, whether they are on social media. It's about what they do on the day of election. And also, I need to say this
briefly.
We shouldn't base all our analysis on what we have done, what we have seen pre-campaign period.
A lot could still change.
When the campaign starts,
Yeah.
and the campaign is going to be for 5 months, is an awful long time that will take a lot.
And it's a costly exercise.
A very
as
costly
well.
exercise.
Yeah.
And it's going to really task all the candidates.
Well, that's a very good point. And a final word from you, Professor Adeniyi. We've got about a minute and a half or so.
Yeah, but I think they are interesting times. The election period is like a festival of democracy.
A carnival.
A carnival. And of course, gradually the aspirants are becoming more issue-oriented, even if some of them are more issue-oriented than the others. Some of them are becoming much more forthcoming than we expect them to be. But we also expect a lot more of them to be very, very forthcoming. But I think it's also important to underscore the fact that, yes, we have problems with our politicians, but we have also had politicians who have been fantastic in the evolution, in the annals of Nigeria's history. You know, just that those ones who have been outstanding, you know, are maybe a small population. We need a lot more of them to be very outstanding, such that they can alter the character of a problematic institution. The interaction between the man and the institution, for instance, at the present is still very faulty.
Right.
We have individuals overriding the institution.
Okay.
And that's what Professor Tommy was trying to underscore.
Okay.
So we need strong individuals that will reshape the story of our institution, you know, to bring about sustainability, growth, and development as a nation. Yeah.
And on that hopeful note, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi and, of course, Waziri Adio, thank you very much indeed. I'm always smarter when I talk to you guys. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.